I'm 59 years old, and I keep hearing people my age say things like, my life is basically over, or even, I'm just waiting to die. And every time I hear that, I think, God, have we really decided that this is what being 50 or over 50 means? That all the excitement is behind us? That all the big firsts have happened? That by this age, we're supposed to know exactly who we are, what we're doing, and pretty much how the rest of the story goes? Because I don't. And strangely enough, I'm becoming more and more okay with that. In fact, I'm starting to wonder if one of the most exciting things about being 59 is that I still don't completely know who I'm going to become. And I don't think I'm starting over. I think I'm starting from 59. There's a big difference. I was 38 years old the first time I ever painted anything. I'm an artist now, among other things. I showed up at my mom's house with a canvas and some oil paints. And she looked at everything and she said, "What's all this?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to paint a portrait of Kitty." Kitty was my grandmother who had recently died, and I was grieving. And my mother looked at me like I had lost my mind. She said, "What? You're not a painter. You don't know how to paint." And you know what? She was right. I wasn't a painter. Yet. I didn't know how to paint. I hadn't gone to art school. I had no training. I didn't have some grand plan that I was going to become an artist. I just wanted to paint my grandmother. So I painted. And that one decision opened up an entire part of my life that I didn't even know was there. Think about that. What if I had decided at 38 that real artists start when they're children? What if I had decided I was too old to learn? Or worse, what if I'd allowed somebody else's idea of who I was supposed to become determine who I was allowed to become? I would have missed an entire part of myself. You know, people joke about this all the time. I still don't know who I want to be when I grow up. I've heard people say that in their 50s and 60s almost apologetically. And I'm starting to think we should quit apologizing for it, because I think most of us are guessing a whole lot more than we're willing to admit. Some people are just better at making their guesses look like a plan. We're supposed to have it all figured out by now. At 59, I should be able to tell you exactly who I am and exactly what the next 10 or 20 years of my life are going to look like. I can't. And maybe I don't want to. Because if I already know everything I'm going to do, everything I'm going to experience, everything I'm going to believe or create, and every version of myself I'm ever going to become, that sounds awfully finished to me. And I'm not finished. There's something I do when I paint that I've been thinking about a lot lately, particularly when I paint abstracts. Sometimes I'll stand in front of a blank canvas and have absolutely no idea where the painting is going. I'd like to tell you I have some kind of brilliant artistic strategy. I don't. Sometimes I don't even know what colors I'm going to use. So eventually I choose one. I make a mark, and then I stand back. I look at it. Maybe I like it. Maybe I don't. Maybe that mark tells me what needs to happen over here. So I make another mark. And I stand back again, and I look. I respond. And sometimes I put something on that canvas and think, well, that was a terrible idea. So I change it. I paint over it. Or sometimes that mistake leads me towards something I never would have thought of otherwise. But here's what never happens. I never create a painting by standing in front of the canvas, waiting until I know exactly what the finished painting is supposed to look like. At some point, I have to make a mark. And I think we forget that about our lives. We keep waiting for clarity before we act. What should I do? Who am I supposed to become? What's my purpose? What if I make the wrong decision? What if I'm not good at it? What if people think I'm ridiculous? I don't think clarity always comes before action. In fact, sometimes clarity comes because of the action. You make a mark, you learn something. You stand back, you reassess, and then you make another. And here's where this metaphor gets even more interesting to me. At 59, I'm obviously not standing in front of a blank canvas. Thank God. Because as an artist, I hate painting on a stark white canvas. I much prefer having an underpainting. An underpainting is simply a layer of color paint that's already on the canvas before you begin developing the finished painting. And I love it because it adds depth, it adds interest. And sometimes little pieces of it show through the layers that come later. It affects what you put on top of it. And I started thinking, my first 59 years aren't just behind me. They're underneath it. They're underneath me. They're the underpainting. There are already a hell of a lot of layers on this canvas. Things I've learned, people I've loved, people I've lost, things I've accomplished, mistakes I've made, things I wish I had done differently, things I'm incredibly grateful happened exactly the way they did. I don't have to erase all of that and start over. I get to build on it. I'm not starting over at 59. I'm starting from 59. And there's another side to this, because not everything in our past deserves to determine what happens next. Some of the marks underneath weren't even put there by us. Now listen to this. Some of the marks underneath weren't even put there by us. Somebody told you who you were. Maybe it was a parent, a teacher, a spouse, a friend, somebody who didn't like you. Maybe you've even been told that you're not creative, or you're not smart enough, you're too sensitive, you're too old, you're not the kind of person who does something like that. And after hearing something long enough, sometimes we stop recognizing it as somebody else's opinion. It becomes our own voice. It becomes part of the underpainting. But here's the thing about an underpainting. It influences what comes next, but it doesn't have to dictate it. You know, my mother said, "You're not a painter." Had I accepted that as the final description of me, she would have been right forever. I didn't prove her wrong by arguing with her. I painted. And sometimes the only way we discover that an old story about ourselves isn't true is by doing something that story says we can't do. I've started thinking about all of this as something I call the unpainted self. And I don't mean the person you should have become at 25. I'm not interested in spending the rest of my life grieving some imaginary version of me who made every right decision. I mean the parts of you that simply haven't happened yet. The unpainted self isn't the person you failed to become. It's the person you haven't had a chance to become yet. There are things I don't know about myself because I haven't done the thing yet that would allow me to discover them. At 37, I didn't know what kind of painter I was. I didn't even know I was a painter. How could I? I hadn't painted anything. I didn't wait until I knew I was a painter to paint. I painted. And that's how I became one. So maybe at 59, I don't need to know exactly who I'm becoming. Maybe the better question isn't, who am I supposed to become? Maybe it's, what am I curious enough to try next? And listen, I'm not going to give you some line about how age is just a number. It isn't. I'm 59. I'm not 25. There are things I could have done at 25 that I can't do now. I hate to say that, but it's true. There are opportunities that are gone. There are years I don't get back, and that's real. But here's what I refuse to do. I refuse to take the fact that some possibilities are gone and turn it into the conclusion that possibility itself is gone. Those are two completely different things. You might be too old to start young. Okay. You're not too old to start from here. And maybe you have no idea where here is going to land. Good. Neither do I. Maybe there's a little faith involved in all of this. Not certainty, faith. Taking a step without being able to see the whole road. Putting some paint on the canvas without knowing what the finished painting will look like. Because uncertainty isn't always something to fear. Sometimes uncertainty is possibility. So if you're over 50 and you're sitting there thinking, is this it? I don't know, but I hope not. And maybe you don't need some massive reinvention. Maybe you don't need to quit your job, move across the country, find your life's purpose, or finally figure out exactly who you are. Maybe you just need to become curious again. Try something, learn something, make something, have a conversation. Do one thing the old story about you says you wouldn't do. Make a mark. Then stand back. Look. Pay attention to what it teaches you. Then make another. I'm 59 years old. I don't know exactly who I'm going to be at 65. And you know what? I'm glad I don't. Because I'm not a finished portrait. Neither are you. There's still parts of us that haven't been painted yet. And 5 years from now, we can be 5 years older and still wondering what might have happened. Or we can be 5 years into discovering it. So no, I'm not starting over at 59. I'm starting from 59. And I can't wait to see what happens next.